record all of Jeff's embarrassment. But yeah, happy birthday, Jeff.
What's
Happy
that?
birthday, Jeff. Happy birthday.
Thank you. You know,
You need to
Another-
unspotlight.
Happy birthday, Jeff.
another year without God realization. You know what I mean?
78, 78,
79.
70. Oh, no, no.
Wow.
What?
You,
Thank you.
He still kicks butt on the volleyball court.
you are God realized at your core, Jeff. You are God realized at your core of your being.
Yeah, I just haven't shown up to collect it.
Okay.
But Biff is somewhere there, but
So let's get go
yeah.
ahead.
You need to
Gail
take
is still
spotlight.
spotlighted.
Yeah, you need to unspotlight Gail.
Okay.
And now I'm gonna make Margie.
There we
Host.
go.
Stop yelling at me. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Okay. So today or tonight, well, for Biff it's today, for us it's tonight. We have an amazing guest who is super, super important in my life, and that is the lovely, the incredible, the stupendous, the one and only Bif Soper. Biff, do you want to say hi? Let's see if your sound's working. Uh-oh.
He's muted.
Yeah, you gotta unmute.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes, your sound is great. So
happy birthday, Jeff. I'm just a youngster in comparison. I'm only 75. Margie, on Messenger, I sent you my friend's email address. You said you can send him the link so he can also listen.
yeah, I got it. Don't you worry, I'll handle it.
Okay.
But so so Biff, I forget how many years it's been. I know it's over 25, but Biff has lived consistently in India without leaving, not even to do like one of those little visa in and outs, right, Biff? Am I correct about that?
I've been living here 30 years. The last time I left India was 1996.
Yeah, so he's had lots of time, and Biff was, when I was 14, my first trip, Biff kind of took me under his wing, and he's an amazing storyteller. And so I want to have Biff on for the next couple weeks telling some of his stories about time with the mandali, the Mohammed, the mast, living there, etc. But we thought for tonight, Biff was going to tell his coming to Baba story, so you guys have a little bit of a background and know that I didn't just find some random guy on the street to tell Baba stories, that he's legit. So I'm going to turn it over to Biff to start to tell his coming to Baba story. And then at the end, we can have some questions if anybody has. But yeah, we're going to give it over to Biff.
And
Yeah,
you can hear me.
Yeah, but we can't. You're kind of just more of a silhouette to me. Can you get a little closer to the camera? There. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's much better. Your angle is really bad. Now you're in the dark again.
He's on the
Okay,
roof
if I
of the
lean-
staff quarters.
Oh,
If you put the sun in front of you instead of behind you, it'll be much better.
Then I'll be looking into the sun. What if I look? What if I look down? Is that any better? Or it's still a silhouette.
Yeah, there you're good. There, that's good.
Yeah.
That's better.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll kind of lean forward. I
Yeah.
suppose.
Mm.
Okay.
If the sun's off to the side, even it's better. You're what they call backlit. So that puts you automatically in the shadow if you have the sun right behind you.
How about if I turn to the side? I wonder if that'll
Yeah.
make a difference. Let me try that.
Oh,
Is that any better?
yeah.
Yeah, it's a little better. Yeah, that's good, Biff.
Technical difficulties. So is that acceptable?
Yes.
I didn't hear
We can
from
see your-
Jeff for Coney. Is it okay, Jeff?
Yeah, you look good. You know? And
You're
we'll get you a
you're lying. You shouldn't lie on your birthday.
well, I mean, not something that a plastic surgeon couldn't improve.
As Charles Haynes has been saying, when at our age they say you look good, that means you look old. You're looking very good.
Thank you.
You
I
are.
appreciate it. Okay, should I begin?
Yeah.
Yes, you should.
Okay. So I'll begin in the beginning. I was born in Baltimore, Maryland. And I like to say, some people actually believe this, that at the age of 2, I put on a backpack and stuck out my thumb and hitchhiked to California. But I did at the age of 2 go to California. And I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area in a town called Atherton. And next door to Atherton is Woodside and also Menlo Park. And very close is Stanford University in Palo Alto. And in 1956, Mayor Baba, when he came to San Francisco, he drove down to my neighborhood. And I was 8 years old at the time. And he went to Ivy Deuce's house. And later he went, which was in Woodside. And later he went to Don Stevens' house, which was in Menlo Park, which was only a few miles from where I was at the age of 8. And years later, I think at Meherabad, I saw a movie that was taken of Baba when he was visiting Ivy Deuce in Woodside. And Baba walks through the dining room and out into the yard. I think there was a swimming pool. And then the camera pans up over a hedge and is looking towards some hills. And when I saw that, I thought, he's looking directly at me. When I was 8, he was looking in my direction and smiling. And something that I realized later was that if you drew a circle from Menlo Park to Woodside, and in that area, there was 8 of us that became friends. And some of us were as young as 12 and others were 19. And we went to 5 different schools. And somehow we found each other and became friends. And later on, all of us became Baba lovers. Each in our own way. It wasn't a group process, but it was very individual. And one of the friends was, at the time, he was 5 years old when Baba came to Woodside. And he was living a mile from the house of Ivy Deuce at the time. And his name is Jay Bonner. And later he ended up marrying Baba's niece, Shireen, the daughter of Adi Jr. And then probably many of you know Beverly Smith. So she and her sister were in that group of 8. Although her sister, I don't think, became a Baba lover. But so the sister wasn't actually the group of 8, but I knew her also. And just as an aside, Beverly's here at Meherabad right now. And she writes beautiful Baba songs. And I always say that I was raised an agnostic, as both of my parents were agnostic. But at a certain point, they decided I have two younger sisters, and they decided that we should go to a Presbyterian Sunday school. And so that we could decide for ourselves about the idea of God and religion. And I found the Presbyterian Sunday school fairly boring. But there were a few stories that were told about Christ and his disciples that touched me. And I did feel an attraction towards those stories about Christ and his mandali. I'm going to just have a drink of water. So I was, growing up in the 1960s in the Bay Area, and there was a lot going on at the time. And there was the tension of the civil rights movement. There was a war in Vietnam. And in the mix also was people experimenting with what they called psychedelic drugs, that the proponents of those drugs, like Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary, who were Harvard professors at the time, were saying, oh, this is very positive experience and that you can expand your mind, was one of the things that they would tell people. And I always say that it was a novelty to most of the society at that time, and we were curious about it. And when I was 19, some friends of mine and myself, we were living in a cabin in the woods in the redwood forest area of the Santa Cruz Mountains, which is maybe 15 miles from the Bay Area and close to the Pacific Ocean. And it was kind of an idyllic situation for us, where we had a fireplace, and when we ran out of gas, we just chopped wood and would cook popcorn and brown rice and make chapatis. And my friend, who was Swedish, he was interested in photography, and he and I were taking courses in photography. And he had decorated the cabin with an Indian bed sheet hanging from the ceiling, and he had a good sound system. So we were listening to Ravi Shankar on his stereo system and burning incense. And it became like a clubhouse for all of our friends. So all of those friends that I mentioned earlier, they would show up at the cabin playing hooky from school or coming for the weekend and staying there. And none of us were interested in religion, but we were curious and interested in consciousness, the idea of consciousness. And so we had a very eclectic collection of books in our library in this little cabin in the woods, which included The Way of Zen by Alan Watts and Black Elk Speaks, a Native American, and Autobiography of a Yogi, which I didn't find very interesting. And just back to the atmosphere of in the culture at that time, for us in the San Francisco Bay Area, there was kind of a euphoria. And I always attribute it to Meherabad, because at that time in '67, Baba was doing this intensive universal work in seclusion. He was in very strict seclusion. And he would sit in a chair in Mandali Hall, and all the mandali had to keep pin drop silence. And then after he was done, he would be, after doing this intensive work for a couple of hours, he would be exhausted, and it was very intense. But I always feel that the after effects of that work we were feeling. And even my friends that knew, and myself, I didn't know about Meherabad at the time, we felt this little bit of optimism and this freedom that anything's possible, that we can change society for the better, and we can be creative and do all kinds of things and make a difference. And I attribute that to the work that Baba was doing at that time. And one of the things that happened was at Stanford University, some of the professors and students were wanting to give courses that the administration wouldn't allow. And so they formed a free university where any course could be offered. And if you had students showed up, then you could teach the course. So my friend Kevin Dwyer and his sister Sarah were taking a course on Meherabad that was being offered by a couple that were Sufis. And the textbook for the course was the discourses. And so Kevin went, next time he came to the cabin, he brought the discourses with him and showed them to me. So it was the first time I saw a photograph of Meherabad. And I didn't read the discourses at that time. I wasn't interested. But I read a one-page description of who Meherabad is. And in it, Baba says, I am God in human form. And he was living at the time. So my reaction was, well, this man halfway around the world says that he's God in human form, but I don't even know if God exists. And that was it. I did, as I said, I didn't read the discourses at that time. And as I was saying, there was this curiosity about using psychedelic drugs such as LSD and peyote and mushrooms and things like that. So for myself, I was a serious seeker. I thought, oh, I can make myself better by doing this. But so when I tried it, I had what you call a bad trip. And I had a very intensive experiences where I'd hallucinate whole things that weren't even happening. And in my innocence, I took the advice of the people that had previously used those psychedelic drugs and were saying, oh, it's a great thing. And if you do it right, you'll have a spiritual experience. And I thought, well, there must be something wrong with me because I didn't. I had a negative experience. So I better do it again to get over whatever problem I have. And later I realized that I would have never gotten over it. And that basically I was just poisoning myself. But that I didn't have that notion at the time. And also I had gone to a lecture in Palo Alto, a lecture given by Richard Alpert, who was one of those Harvard professors that were promoting LSD. And they even, I think they even, Baba referred to it as, they had the notion that you can find God in a pill. And they thought you could. And Alpert actually had correspondence with Meherabad. So after he gave his general talk, there was a question and answer session. And someone raised their hand and said, oh, we hear that you've been corresponding with Meherabad. And he turned red in the face and wouldn't even answer the question. And I heard later is that in the correspondence, Alpert was sending Baba these great descriptions of his great spiritual experiences on LSD. And he compared them with the experience that Arjun had with Krishna. And Baba wrote back and said, you're just deluding yourself. And that's not a real experience, because a real spiritual experience, because a real spiritual experience is lasting. And your experience, you lose it over time, and then you have to use the drug again to try to regain whatever you thought you had lost. But when Baba's name was mentioned, my ears kind of perked up, and I remember having a reaction just hearing Baba's name. I'm going to drink some more water. And I remember being in Haight-Ashbury in San Francisco. And that was the time when all the people that were into this New Age consciousness had kind of gathered in that neighborhood. And I remember walking on the sidewalk, walking behind these two older fellows, and they were saying they don't want to be called beatniks anymore. They're hippies. And that was the first time I remember I heard the word hippie. And I was in a head shop in Haight-Ashbury. And the head shop is where they sell all the paraphernalia for using drugs, like hookah pipes and rolling papers and things like that. And inside the shop, I was walking around and I saw this big photograph of a man. And I just walked past it, and it kind of caught my eye. And I thought, well, he looks very wise. So I turned around and I looked closer, and it was Meher Baba. And years later, I heard that Baba had informed the Sufis to go around and put his photograph, and with a warning not to use drugs. So under the photograph of Meher Baba, there was the words, Meher Baba says, don't use drugs. And I was so naive at the time that I thought, well, he looks wise, but why does he say not to use drugs? Because everyone I know that wants to create a better society, a more just society that's against the war in Vietnam, at least smokes pot. And the people that don't, that consume alcohol, are the generals that want to fight the wars, and the politicians and the bankers. And they don't want things to change at all. So that was how I was thinking at the time. And so later, I was back at our little cabin in the woods one night, and a friend of ours who was half Russian and her father was from Arkansas, named Candy Hill, she came to visit. And she was all excited because she'd been up in Haight-Ashbury with her friend. And they'd met a witch. And the witch had taught them how to make witch's brew. And so when she told us that, we thought, oh, sounds really interesting. You know, we'll make a big punch bowl and we'll have a party. And that was our notion. But then we thought, well, we should try it first and see if it works. So we said, Candy, how do you make this witch's brew? And she said, do you have any wine? And we had this cheap bottle of Red Mountain wine, so we brought that out. She said, do you have any LSD? And we said, yes. So we put the LSD in the bottle of wine. Do you have any mescaline? And so we put our mescaline in the wine. Do you have any psilocybin? So we also put the psilocybin in the wine. And we were so enthusiastic that we took water from the hookah pipe where we'd been smoking hashish and put that in the wine, and we drank it. And amazingly, I didn't have a bad trip this time. And it was, the whole experience was very lighthearted. And we were just laughing and making silly jokes and staying up all night. And I remember my friend was up in the rafters of our cabin with the blanket over his shoulders and flapping his wings and saying, "I'm a kooky looky bird." And we thought it was hilarious. And then late in the early morning, around 2 or 3 in the morning, I was in the one separate room in this cabin in the woods alone. And all of a sudden this thought came, Meher Baba says, don't use drugs. And my response was, well, if he knew what a good time we're having, he'd say it was okay. And I still believe that to this day. And then the next thought was, well, Meher Baba says that he's God in human form. And all of a sudden, I had the desire and the question, what is it like to be God? I know what it's like to be me, but I wonder what God's experience is. And when I was rational later, I thought, well, that was the moment where I stopped being an agnostic and became a believer in God, or I wouldn't have asked the question. And all of a sudden, everything disappeared, and I just had this perfect concentration on this one thought. Well, what's it like? What's it like to be God? What's God's experience? And after I don't know how long, what came to me was, well, if God is the creator of all of this, that the whole creation came out of him, then there's absolutely nothing that exists in this world that he didn't create. No matter how horrible or how beautiful, it all came from him, if he's the creator and the source of all. And then I thought, well, that means that God is everywhere and he's in everything. And then I remembered, you know, Meher Baba was still living. This is 1968. And I thought, well, this man in India says he's that. So if he's really that, then he's here in this room halfway around the world at this moment. And at that moment, I felt his presence all around me. And I remember telling this story to Baidul's daughter. Baidul was one of the mandali, and he was the famous must hunter for Meher Baba. And his daughter, when I told her this story, she said, "Oh, you had Meher Baba's darshan." And I feel most fortunate because he was still in the body, and for me, that was important. And at that free university I told you about, I took a course on communes. So I was very interested in if there's a better way for people to live together than the way I grew up in the suburbs. And so that summer, myself and 2 friends, we spent the summer traveling around North America and Oregon, visiting communes. And we brought along the discourses. So we would be camping around a fire at night, and I'd bring out the discourse, and then I started reading them. And I have a fairly rational mind and an interest in the scientific approach to knowing things. And my experience was when the little that I read from the Bible, my mind said, well, this happened 2,000 years ago. And when I tell a story to a friend and that friend tells the story to another friend, the story changes every time, a little bit at least. And so I know that my rational mind says, well, after 2,000 years, I'm sure the stories aren't how it happened necessarily. And that was my experience. I'd read some things from the Bible and I'd say, oh, I can't believe that. And other things would touch me and I'd feel, well, yeah, that feels right. But when I was reading Baba's discourses, he so beautifully described things that made sense to me. And my critical mind just didn't work. And I just absorbed all of it. And I remember for me, when I read about what Baba says about reincarnation, that before that, I thought, how is it possible that we're so insignificant that we only have one life in this creation? And either we get it right and we go to heaven, or we get it wrong, go to hell. And you have to do everything in one lifetime. And when Baba explained about reincarnation, that you have many lifetimes and you have all the opposite experiences, and it goes on and on. It was such a relief that I didn't have to do everything in one lifetime. Although there's a danger to it too, because I'm a natural procrastinator. So now I'm putting some things off until my next lifetime. And while we were hitchhiking, visiting these communes, every Monday we'd be sure to be back in Berkeley, because there was the Meherabad meetings that they had at the university. And I remember at one of the meetings, they showed a film of Meherabad giving darshan. And I was 20 at the time, and Baba was quite an old man in the film. And all these people are coming before him, and he was so attentive and so energetic and available. And I was watching this as a young man, and I'm thinking, well, I could never do what this old man is doing. And then I focused on the people's reaction after they had just had Baba's darshan. And some you could see were within themselves, absorbing the experience. Some had tears coming down their cheeks. Some people were smiling. And somehow intuitively, I knew that he was helping each one individually. And when I recognized that, I said, okay, you are who you say you are. And at that time, I completely accepted him and wanted to know more and more about him and to get closer and closer to him. And that's how I ended up here in Meherabad for 30 years, because that's always been my goal, is just to get whatever it takes, get closer to him. That's what I want to do. Story. Is anybody going to say something?
Sorry, Biff, you cut out for a second. But just at the end. Here, I'll turn my camera back on.
Should I repeat something?
No, I think we heard it all. It was just like the very last sentence you said, so I wasn't sure if you were done.
Yeah,
Well,
that's the story.
Thank
I
you
would
for
like
sharing
a
your
lot more
story.
detail.
And how did you start cooking there and being in charge of all the food, Biff?
I couldn't quite hear. You said something about cooking.
Yeah, weren't you in charge of all the cooking, and then you took tours of people? Like I went with you to the Elora Caves. You don't remember?
Yeah, but I'm not. Alan Wagner is in charge of cooking. I'm a gardener. So I've looked after the gardens in Lower Meherabad in the historic part, and I still go and work in Maris Garden at Meherabad. Yeah, we just had a nice trip to the Elora Caves and the Valley of the Saints on Monday.
What is the name of that mosque that's below where Sai Baba got God realization?
Well, they're actually dargas, I think you're referring to. So below the cave where we call it Sai Baba's cave, there's 6 plain saints darga. Darga means that the saint had his court there when he had disciples, and then when he dies, his body is put inside the tomb
Right.
shrine.
I guess that's
And
what
then
it
there's a second one you can see from down below Sai Baba's cave, which is the perfect master's darga, Zarzari Zarbash. So I'm not sure which one you're referring to.
Zarzari Zarbash, I think.
Yeah.
Where's the one where they sweep you? Is that the other one?
Well, they do it in both places. But what you mean by sweeping is that Eretz explained they have a fan, you could call it, made of peacock feathers. And they touch it to the tomb of the saint or the perfect master, and then they hit you on the head with it and strike you on the back. And Eric said it's the transference of good impressions from the master saint to you.
The place.
Bif, can you?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, that's okay. Did you have more questions?
Well, yeah, I'm trying to figure out the name of this place. Where when you go there, they say if you can make a wish and you tie something onto a tree, and if it comes true, you're supposed to go back there. But when I was there, and it was on one of the trips to Elora, and it was below Sai Baba's cave, there were steps up to it, and to the right was where the saint was. And I was there at the time when the evening prayers were taking place. So all the people were doing the bowing toward the east and all of that. It was very provocative.
Yeah, that would have been the Darga of Zarzari Zarbash.
Okay.
So he was a Sufi perfect master who came there with his disciples in the 1300s. And his name means giver of gold.
Oh.
But it's spiritual gold, not material gold. And his tomb is unique in that it's not just him buried inside, but there's a second soul buried there. And Eretz would refer to that person as his spiritual companion. And we believe that disciple at that time in the 1300s is the one that eventually became Sai Baba of Shirdi, who was the perfect master during Baba's time and one of his 5 perfect masters. And Baba said that Sai Baba was the head of the spiritual hierarchy. And Baba actually told the story, and that's why we know it. He said that this disciple of Zarzari was exceptional. So when the master gives an order, it's often very difficult to carry out the order. But this higher level of disciple is someone like Mera, that they can anticipate the needs of the master. So when Zarzari would get ill, this disciple would run out into the woods and find herbs to help cure him. And Baba said that the master was so pleased with him that he gave him a special boon. And that boon wasn't expressed until that soul took form in the 1800s. And that soul was born into a very poor family. And it was just he and his mother, and they had no money and were having a difficult time. But they were befriended by a 6-plain saint who was blind. So they joined the ashram of the saint. And soon this little boy was the favorite of the master. And the master was showering all his love on this little boy. And the other older disciples became jealous
Mm.
and they would complain, we've served the master so faithfully for so many years, and this newcomer is receiving all the attention and care from the master. So after some years, they were so fed up, they decided that they would get rid of the boy. And one day the master and the boy were sitting on rocks by a stream, and the disciples were hiding behind trees and started throwing rocks to kill the boy. And instead of hitting the boy, they hit the master. And so the boy recognized that he was a disturbance in the ashram, and he left. And inwardly, he was guided to where he had been with Zarbash 500-600 years before. And then he just wandered up this hill into this cave, which is in the very, very highest point overlooking the Elora Caves and the Valley of the Saints. And Zarbash had also used that cave. And the boy just lay down inside the cave, and it said that he just lay there in this God-absorbed state for 3 to 4 years with no food, no water. And then at the age of 19, 20, he emerged. Oh, and while he was in the cave, the blessing finally descended and he became God realized. And he came out of the cave a living skeleton. And I think he had contacts with some of the living perfect masters at that time. And then he wandered into this dusty little village named Shirdi. And the first person that saw him saw this tremendous light all around him. And he says, "Oh, Sai." So he became known as Sai Baba. And then, as Baba explains, he became head of the spiritual hierarchy and was in charge until he passed on that responsibility to Meherabad. Because Baba said that Sai Baba was in charge of World War I. And finally, at the end of World War I in 1918, Sai Baba dropped his body. And then Meher Baba was then head of the whole spiritual hierarchy.
Wow.
Thanks for that story, Jeff. So Rich has his hand up. Let's go to Rich. Hi, Rich. I got your email too. I'm not ignoring you. I just haven't answered it yet.
Oh.
But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, Bif, so once Baba was in the body, you'd realized he was the avatar. There's a whole story in the next, 30 years. So what happened when Baba dropped the body, for example? Next step, I guess.
Okay, so that's a long story. I don't know how much time we have. No, I'm asking Margie.
Can you do it in the next half hour?
I can attempt it.
Okay. Is this your moving to Meherabad story that you're about to tell?
It could include that, or do you want to save that?
Yeah. Well, that was what I was
What?
hoping you would tell next. Yeah. Can you kind of can you make it a part of it? Because that's a good story.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, okay, I can't. I'll leave out a lot of details because otherwise it'll take too long. But so I became Meher Baba's lover in 1968, and Baba was inviting us to come for his darshan. And because he would send messages and they'd read them out at the Berkeley Baba meetings. And I remember he would also say things like, "I will be breaking my silence soon. And the whole world will have the experience of who I am." He also said, "There's a dark cloud fast approaching." And years later in Meherabad, I remember Arnava saying, "Well, the dark cloud is here." And but when Baba said soon, I'll break my silence soon, I thought, well, that meant a couple of years. And now it's been 55 years and I'm still waiting. But anyway, I told you that I was interested in the idea of communes. So my friends, who some of them were students at this new university at University of California at Santa Cruz, which is a beach town, the surfers town, but they have this beautiful campus. It was a brand new campus out and had redwood forests also, overlooking the Monterey Bay. And my friends were students, so they had found this 4-acre little farm. And somehow when I was in that cabin in the woods, I had this really strong desire that later I attributed to Meherabad. But the desire was to grow my own food. So I was very interested in that. And one of my friends, the student that was renting this farm, he invited me to come and be their resident farmer. And that's a whole nother story about gardening and meeting some people. But anyway, I moved down to this farm, and I turned it into a commune. So we bought big 100-pound sacks of brown rice and 50-pound sacks of whole wheat flour and big, 25 pounds of oatmeal. And I was at that time I was cooking. I do know how to cook. I've cooked in a couple of restaurants, but at Meherabad I've not been part of cooking food for pilgrims. And so this became a commune, and some of the people that I met, like Will David, Eric Nadell, and Charlie Keeler, they found out about Baba at that time. And Erico and Will told me that I'm the one that brought them to Baba. I would tell them what I knew about Baba and also share the discourses and other books at the time with them. And so I wanted to come to this darshan program that Baba was inviting us to. And my business was I had a hand-dipped candle company called Pepperland Hand-Dipped Candles. And we would dip candles in these vats and dip them again and again and make a candle. And we had colored wax and we'd make them bright colors and we'd add scents so they'd smell good. And then we'd make them into different shapes and things like that. But ultimately I couldn't dip enough candles to afford the $450 round trip to India. And also one of the messages that Baba sent at that time was, "This darshan is for my lovers only." And I wanted to be 100% honest with Baba, and I was so new to him, I didn't know what it meant to be his lover. And years later, I was in Mandali Hall, and the Eretz is talking about that time. And he says, the message was, "This darshan is for my lovers only, or those who would like to be." And I thought, that's not possible. I would have noticed that. So I went and I researched, the old records, and that wasn't true. So I went back to Eric. I said, no, it didn't say it, but at least what was sent to us, it didn't say that. He said, well, maybe that was sent around India. But then of course he says, but sometimes you should take the risk. And so that was going on. And then we were living at this commune that was named Pepperland when Meher Baba dropped the body. And I remember even not everyone in the commune were Baba lovers, but everyone knew about Baba. And everyone just spent the day walking to the cliff overlooking the Pacific Ocean and just sitting there meditatively and then walking back. And I remember Will David, he likes to say he worked at a garden project up at the university with an old the most amazing gardener I've ever met, an old Englishman named Alan Chadwick. So he'd work up there during the day and then he'd come back to Pepperland. And he's described it that when he put his feet on the ground of Pepperland, it was like being in Meherabad. So I think Baba really did bless us without us, of course, knowing. But it was a special time. But I wasn't able to go. And then this is also a short version of what happened. But I'm trying to figure out how to condense the story. So anyway, my friends would come here. So Eric and Heather were finally together and they came here, and Will was the first one who came here, and Charlie Keeler and Pat Carlson and other people. And they come back and tell me about their experiences here. But I had gone to Mehermount and met Agnes Barron. And one of the things she told me was, she said, "Why do you want to go to India? The mandali are old and tired. You're just going to bother them. You should just stay here and live the life. And don't even talk about him. Unless people see something in you and then they ask, then you can tell them." And I told my response at the time to Agnes, well, I believe what you're saying, but eventually I do want to go to India. And this is also a very short version, but in 1975, I moved to Meherabad and I lived there helping Agnes at Meherabad for 2.5 years. And I finally had the money. My grandmother left me some money when she died. And so, but I was working in Santa Paula, which is a little community below Meherabad. And so I only had 2-week vacation. So in 1977, I came here to Meherabad just for 10 days. But it was the most blissful 10 days of my life because I met everyone that was living at the time. So Mera, Mani, Erich, and Bao, and Pendu, and Padri, and Mansari, and all of them. And it was a special blessing to be here at that time. And even though I was only here for 10 days, I knew, because I said my only wish is to get closer to him. So I thought, well, the best place to do that is Meherabad. So my goal was to come back to Meherabad and live here. But I didn't have the money. And Money was the chairman. And she could be very strict and disciplined. And she would tell people, well, the trust doesn't have any money, so you have to come and support yourself. And she would quiz people, well, how much money do you have? Do you have enough to live here? And I remember she told one person, you need $20,000 before you come. And I didn't have, enough money like that. So I say that took 15 years of longing to eventually get to live here. But I would come when I could. And towards the end, I would come for like 5-6 months at a time and then go back. So I was here in 1992. And I would go and work in the garden at Meherzad. And I remember one day, Money was walking on the veranda outside Mandali Hall on her way to commute to work at the trust office in Ahmednagar. And when I saw her, I just felt like the doors open. And even though I don't have enough money, I don't want to miss the opportunity to spend time with these special people with the mandali. And so I walked up to Money and I said, Money, I'd like to become a permanent resident. And she said, as long as I'm living, I'll never say no. And then we sat at a table and she wanted to discuss a few things. So one of the things she asked was, well, how long will you stay? Because some people would come and just stay for 2 or 3 years and then go back and make money and come back again like that. And I looked at her straight in the eye and I said, Money, I hear the pay is very good. So as long as the pay is good, I'll stay. And she knew what I meant, although I was teasing her. And apparently the pay's, definitely the pay is very good and I'm still here. But I was serious. If the pay's not good, I'll leave. And so when she accepted me, she had to write a letter of sponsorship so that I could come back to America and get a special visa to be able to live in India. So she did that. And in the letter, it says, we've known this person for a long time. He's a good person. He's a God-loving person. He's not coming here to do any business. He's not coming here to promote any religion. He's solely coming for spiritual training. And so then I had to take this letter back to America and get a visa. But I was staying longer into the summer that year, that trip. And my friends, John and Franny Foreman, were living in a house, had built a house close to the Samadhi. And Franny is the granddaughter of Baidul, the must hunter, and she's a doctor. And John Foreman is American. They're from Iran originally. And John Foreman is American and he's a nurse. So for many years, they were in charge of the Meher Free Dispensary in Erangam. And while they were here, they had a little girl named Rabia. They named her Rabia. And so that night I went to their house and I was happy to share the good news with them. But as we were talking, how the mind starts working, so I was kind of concerned, where am I going to end up? Am I going to get a job and be able to save money and thoughts like that? And then it was getting late, so I said, oh, I should go now to Lower Meherabad. And little Robbie was listening the whole time. She's still awake. And she says, Daddy, I want to give us some money. And on the top of the refrigerator was a little cup of coins. So John brings it down and she pulls out a dinar and puts it in my hand and says, Sai Baba. And she says, but I want to give him more money. So she takes a second dinar, puts it in my hand and says, Sai Baba. And the next day I saw her at the Samadhi and she had a gold dinar and put it in my hand. And it just felt like this blessing from Baba, from a child. And I had been a Montessori teacher and was such a special experience, the privilege to be with these pure souls at that time. And so then I went back to the US, but I landed in the East Coast. And I'm from California. So I thought, well, I'll travel the country visiting family and friends. And if anyone offers me a good job, I'll settle there and then apply for my visa. But I crossed the whole country and ended up near Portland in West Lynn with the nephew of Rick Choi. So he was Ricky Choi. And I had met them, Rick and Ricky, at Meherabad, and they had this pyramid scheme. And I thought, well, that sounds good. I can do this pyramid scheme and I'll be at the top and live in India and everyone will just send me money. But I wanted to check it out. So I spent a couple of weeks with Ricky and decided this wasn't for me. But while I was there one day, I went to this little restaurant close by in a shopping mall. And I'm having a bowl of soup and this little Japanese woman opens the door and says, Bif, is that you? And it was my ex-wife's sister. And she had her 2 little girls with her. I think they were 4 and 6. And I'd never met the little girls. So we were excited to just meet like that. And I had no idea that they were living there. And so I went out on the sidewalk and we're chatting. And while we're chatting, the littlest girl found an old penny on the sidewalk, and she picked two little flowers and put them in my hand. And again, it just felt like this blessing from Meher Baba. So then I went to California, and I had been involved in I graduated from UC Davis near Sacramento. And I was very involved in the student farm sustainable agriculture program, which is a whole other story. But so I had been living in Davis, and I was hired to work for the university in this program, but I also had started an organic market garden in this amazing community where I lived called Village Homes. And my roommate in this solar designed apartment was a friend named Dawit Zaleka, who was from Ethiopia. And he eventually became a Baba lover. So after when I came back to Davis, he had moved into a co-op house that was specifically built for that purpose in the middle of Village Homes. And there were 4 women and 4 men all living together cooperatively and sharing the cooking duties. And there's a big garden. And Dawit said, "Oh, you can, stay in my room, and you'll be the 9th member of our co-op." And it was a wonderful experience. And anyway, and in Davis, a friend of mine who was a Quaker had started the first farmers market that you see today, that's kind of spread around the country. And by that time in Davis, they had 2 farmers markets, one at the evening, and they would shut off several blocks, and it would be like a fair, with musicians and magicians and homemade tamales, and then all the organic produce and flowers, and it was a nice atmosphere. So it was summertime, and I went to this farmers market, and I ran into this woman that I had sold produce to in the natural food stores in San Francisco. And I said, "Oh, do you want to have a picnic?" Because there were lawns in front of the houses. And she said, "Well, it's hot, I'd like a beer first." So we walked down the street to this AM PM mini market, and she got her beer, and we got in line. And there was about 8 people in line. And at the front of the line was a man with a little boy who was about 4. And as the man's trying to pay, he drops all these coins on the floor of the store. And the little boy picks up a penny. He comes to the end of the line and puts it in my hand. And everyone's watching, so they start laughing. So then the boy goes back and finds a second penny, picks it up, comes back to me and puts it in my hand. And people laugh more. So then he finds a third penny, and he picks it up, comes to me and puts it in my hand. And they just felt like they belonged to me. So I just put them in my pocket. And when I'm walking out of the store, I said, "I must be so dense. The Baba in this world has to manifest in this way to show me that he's in charge of all my accounts, including my financial accounts, and that there's absolutely nothing to worry about." And that, to top it off, I didn't even think about it at the time, but when I was working for the university, I could join this university and state credit union in Davis. And so I had done that. And the AMP mini market, when I walked out the door, I was looking at that credit union. And even today, that's still my bank that I use. And that's how I'm still here. Part of the reason why I'm still here.
Is that the whole story, Bif, or is there more?
That's that story is finished.
That's the condensed one.
Yeah,
Well,
there's a lot of other stories that I bypassed.
I thought you hit the lottery. That's how you got to India.
Baba's lottery that was controlled by little children.
Well, thank you, Biff, for coming on and telling your story. I'm glad that I've been telling Biff for years that I want to record him talking. And so I'm glad that the late night chat is the way in which it can be done. Because Biff has incredible stories about, he told like his story, which is a great story. But when it comes to listening to him talk about his intimate times with Mohammed or Erich, it's pretty incredible. So I hope over the next couple weeks that he will share. But does anyone have any questions for Biff for tonight? No?
I have a
That's
quick
okay.
question.
Yeah, go ahead, Diane.
I just want to make sure I understood. First of all, thank you so much, Margie, for arranging this, and for Biff for giving us your time and energy. I'm from Southern California, so hello.
Hello.
And I just want to make sure you never met Baba in the body, right?
No, I remember telling the story in Mandali Hall and Eric's listening. And I just somehow I felt that Eric was recognizing that when Baba was doing that intensive work on his own, that just in a second he could come there and give me his darshan. But it was not in the body. It was he was in the body, but he was here in India. And somehow he managed to come to this little cabin in the woods early in the morning in California, in the redwood forest, and give me his darshan.
Thanks, Biff. Okay, let's go to Josh.
Hey, I have a really difficult question I ask lots of people. So forgive me for the difficulty of the question, Biff, but I was wondering that if you could condense your life with Baba into one piece of advice for future generations of Baba lovers, what that one piece of advice would be.
To think of him more and more and to love him more and more. And the beauty of Meherabad is that he's for everyone. Mera said he comes here to give a spiritual push to the whole creation, not just human beings, but to all the animals, all the birds, all the trees, the rocks. He gives a spiritual push. So each soul has a different background. And why I love Baba so much and didn't like religion is that in that final straw that broke my back and made me his lover was that I recognized he was helping each individual in the way that they needed to be helped. So when I say, remember him, to love him, each one of us will find our own way to do that. But, Erich and the Mandali would always emphasize, and Baba himself, of course, be natural, just be yourself, but bring him into the picture as much as you can and more. Have conversations with him and take his advice when he gives it. He says that obedience is higher than love. So if you, and he also said that for 100 years after I drop my body, it'll be the same. I just won't have a body. And Bao would say that during the time he was in the body, he only used his infinite, let's see, I hope I'm getting this right, his infinite knowledge, I think. But now that he's out of the body, he's using his infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. And he's very, very active in the world all over. I mean, living at Meherabad, it's a great privilege to hear people's stories from all over the world. And he just appears into their lives in all different ways. And so it's an individual thing. And Mara used to say, never let anyone come between you and Baba. So it's just you and him. So, and he's totally accessible, especially now. So it's a great privilege for us, no matter how horrible the situation in the world is, there's the beauty and the great fortune to know him more and more deeply. But each one of us has to figure our own way to how to do that.
Thank you, Beth. That's beautiful. That's a great question too, Josh. Let's go to Farishte with her little kitty mask.
Hey, Bif, J Baba.
I don't recognize you. You were just at Meherabad.
I'm in disguise.
You
I
are.
hid in the jungle, so here I am. So I have a couple, 3 questions, so you can either answer all of them or pick one. You said the pay was really good, so I'd love to hear about some of the ways that you feel the pay has been good for you. Number 2 is, do you have any good Mohammed the mast stories? And number 3 is, how do you spend your time now? I know you do a lot of work with films or movie projects or videos, but I don't know a lot about what it is you do now. So tell us more.
Okay,
Beth,
so
can I
I'll
just-
skip. Well, I'm going to tell her that we're going to skip the second question because
Okay.
Margi wants to have a separate session talking about Mohammed and other Meherabad residents that I got to know.
Fair enough.
So the first question, the pay is good. So I said, the only thing I'm interested in is getting closer to Meher Baba. And I remember, when I was new and I would come here, one of the great blessings of being with the mandali was their 100% conviction that Meher Baba is God. And because, I still was I wasn't 100%, you could say that. And just to be around people and their convictions and the way that they would talk about Baba helped to convince me that he is, for me also to be 100%. And I remember that, some of my first trips, they would be so magical and special that when I go back to the West, or when I was here, I'd think about my life in the West and I would feel detached from it. And then I'd go back to the West and start living and doing my work and getting involved. And then it would almost be like, well, I wonder if it feels almost like a dream, my experience at Meherabad. And so there was that dichotomy. But the more I would come here and then go back, it finally was more integrated and I could bring it back with me more solidly. So the good pay was just to spend the time with the mandali and the freshness of the atmosphere here and Baba's presence. And I mean, there's so many aspects to it. Like I said, all the lovers that come now and tell these incredible stories of how Baba's helped them. And it's just on and on. In terms of what I'm doing now, you probably heard that we were evicted from Lower Meherabad. And I used to be supervising all the gardens in the historic part of Meherabad, which includes the gardens in and outside of the old Pilgrim Center, Mandali Hall area. And now I'm not allowed to be there. So except we can go twice a week on what's called, in quotes, a guided tour for 2 hours. So I'm still in touch with the gardeners down there. And if I see something that needs to be done, I mention it to them. But I go out to Meherabad and work in Meher's garden, which is the height of my horticultural career is to work in Maris Garden at Meherabad. And I also do the night duty at the Samadhi. I used to be in charge of all the resident volunteers that are up there all night at the Samadhi. And I still do one night a week. I spend the whole night at Baba's Samadhi. And there's also, we're translating a book that's called Meher Darshan. And it's the book that Baba asked Bao to write in the last week of Baba's time here with us. And he told Bao, I want you to write my life story in 10,000 couplets. And Baba told him, you can write it in Hindi. So Bao did that. And there's a beautiful story attached with that whole experience. And it was published in 1972 in Hindi, but it's never been, and it's sublime. It's so beautiful, but it's never been properly translated into English. So I'm working with Baba lovers here that know Hindi, and then together we're doing our best to translate it into English. In fact, later if Davo is listening to this, he's helping me. He's in Bombay. We do it on Zoom, but we'll be working on it later this morning. And then over the years, I've taken many videos here and traveled to many places in India where Baba's lived and worked and tried to document all that. And I'm trying to deal with all the accumulated tapes and information that I have and get it organized, so that it can be useful and can be shared. So that's a few things that I'm doing currently.
Sweet. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Bif. Okay, we got Rich.
I just wanted to make a quick comment. Biff, when you were talking about your early story, it didn't occur to me until about a year ago, a little more, that I had a story that almost mimics yours. I heard of Baba from Rick Chapman and Alan Cohen anti-drug talk in Fort Collins, Colorado. And a friend and I we still stay in touch from that point in time. But I was walking across the campus with one book of the original discourses. And now I've realized about a year ago, what happened to you, that's what happened to me. Suddenly, I knew Baba was reality. It was his darshan. It was 1968 in October, something like that. It was almost identical experience, but the rest of it doesn't match up. Anyway, thanks for your story, Biff.
Thanks for sharing that. It's wonderful.
Thanks, Rich. Okay, so we're gonna go to Tony, and then there are a couple questions in the chat that people wrote. I wrote them down, and Biff, I'm gonna ask you next time to answer them because they're gonna be long answers. So just keep that in mind. And I want Sanober to know I didn't ignore her. But let's go to Tony.
Hi, Biff. It's really good to see you. I really don't have
Good to see you.
It's good to see you. It brings me back to Meherabad and to Meherabad, and mainly, I don't recall much of whatever we spoke about, but I can see us outside the Pilgrim Center with whatever else was going on at the moment, enjoying Baba's presence. And that's what I'm feeling now, hearing these stories. And it's really great to see you and to hear you.
But I hope you can come again, because it would be fun to share the story of when we were together with Bao and Assisi. Remember?
Yeah.
You remember that?
I sure do.
Yeah.
I sure do.
Yeah, so I maybe we can include that in one of the next talks.
I'm writing it down. I've been trying to get Biff to let me write his book for him, but he says that he won't do it unless I'm in Meherabad. So I tricked him by getting him to be recorded on here. that I can now write his book now.
Some of these Baba girls are pretty tricky. This this Baba lover that was just here. She's originally from El Salvador. I don't know if you met her. She's name is Yasinia, and she knows Angela Chan, and she's a lawyer. And they were only, she brought her sister, her college friend, and her stepmother, who were not Baba lovers. And I was a little reluctant to take them to the caves because I only want to tell the Baba stories. And if people aren't interested, then I'm not interested in going. But Yesinia at the last minute said, "Oh, we're going on Sunday, last Sunday, and we've got a room for you." And they'd been here like 3 or 4 days, and Baba had softened them up, and they were all receptive to the Baba stories, and we had a lovely time on Monday, just a few days ago.
Well, Bif, thank you so much for your time and the time that you will join with us again. I love hearing your stories, and so you're appreciated very much. I guess that's it for tonight. Is there any closing thoughts that you have, Bif?
Well, I'm from the rooftop. I'm looking out over the landscape of Meherabad. So if I could just send Meherabad to all of you, which I know Baba can do. This is a little story that touched me a lot, and it's a little controversial, so I won't go into the details of it. But I had a friend who's an artist in Oregon, and we were chatting on Messenger, and it was, I think, early in the morning my time, and she was really disturbed because something had happened and kind of shaken her faith in Baba. And she said, "Oh, I would feel so much of Baba. And this morning I didn't feel anything, and she was quite depressed." And so we just chatted about the situation, and whatever Baba prompted me to say, I said. And in the middle of it, after this conversation went on for half an hour, she said, "Baba just showered me in his love." And I was so impressed that Baba can do that, just whenever, no matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, he can shower us with his love if he wants to. So I hope all of you can feel his love. I'm sending that from Meherabad.
Bif, can you turn your camera around on your iPad? Do you know how to do that?
I was just gonna say that.
I'm not very tech savvy, so I don't know.
So hold on, let me see if I can help you. Okay. So if you're looking at your screen, hold on.
What if I just look over my shoulder?
There you go.
So we're on the top, just a block from the NPR. So you can't see any of the Meherabad buildings, but just the landscape. Okay.
Great shot.
That was fabulous. Thank you.
Jai Meher Baba.
Jai Baba. Thank you, Bif.
Jai Baba, Bif, thank you.
Jai Baba. So we'll have a moment of silence, and then we'll do 3 Avatar Meher Ki Jays.
Okay, thank you, Bif.
Avatar Meher Baba.
Baba
Ki Jai.
Jai.
Meher
Tar
Baba,
Meher
Tar
Baba,
Baba
Ki
Ki
Jai.
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 Tar Meher Baba,
Baba
Ki
Ki
Baba
Jai.
Ki Jai.
Jai
Happy
Baba.
birthday, Jefferson.